to the table.
Yeah, my favorite.
This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is called to order at 7:01 p.m. Welcome to our community members who have joined us here in the physical space, as well as our community members who are joining us via the YouTube live stream. As has been our practice this school year, we are going to go around the table and introduce ourselves as board directors and superintendent, and then our fabulous student board rep will introduce himself during his board report. So let's start with you, Director Hartland.
Hello. My apologies. I needed an extra 1 second there. I am Director Rachel Hartland. I am in my first term. This is partway through my second full year on the board. I am a Minnetonka resident and have been for over 6 years. We moved here to open enroll, or we originally open enrolled in Hopkins and then moved here when it became clear that this was our values match. So I currently have a 7th grader at North Junior High, and I have a 5th grader and a 3rd grader at Meadowbrook.
Hi, my name is Katie O'Shea Peterson. I am just rounding out my third. I'm starting my fourth. I'm in my fourth.
Yes. Fourth year.
Time flies when you're having fun. Fourth year on the school board. I have a 5th and a 6th grader at Meadowbrook.
I'm Steve Adams. I'm in my 12th year on the school board. Resident of Minnetonka, live near the high school, a neighbor of Rachel's. And I had I have two adult children that all went through all their education in the Hopkins School District. Kindergarten, actually pre-K through 12.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rhoda Mary Perry Reed, Superintendent. I've been in my role for 6 years, and I have a 5th grader at Eisenhower. She'll be at West. Next year, I have a 9th grader at North who will be at our high school next year, and I have a stepson who is serving as a kindergarten para at Eisenhower Elementary.
I'm Jen Westmoreland, she, her pronouns. I am in my 6th year on the school board. I currently serve as chair. I'm a proud graduate of Hopkins High School. The year is not important. I am a current parent of a Hopkins student, a 6th grader at Xingjing, and it's an honor to serve this community.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Shannon Andreessen, and I am in my 4th year here on the Hopkins School Board, and I parent 2 children. The eldest is a Hopkins graduate who is currently at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, and I have a 9th grader at West.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Khan. I have had 2 kids in the district. They both graduated from Hopkins, and currently they are attending the University of Minnesota. I myself have lived in Hopkins for over 12 years now, and welcome. Bye.
Hello, my name is Jason Ross. I have 2 4th graders, 1 1st grader. I've lived in Hopkins for the past 10 plus years, and this would be my 2nd year, 1st term, and thank you for coming tonight.
Great, thank you. So our next agenda item is open agenda. This is one of the times when we hear public comment from our community members. We have 2 public comment periods during every meeting. The first public comment period is for items on the agenda. The second public comment period that comes at the end of the meeting is for items not on the agenda. And we are happy to have community members with us this evening who have filled out public comment cards for items not on the agenda. So I'll be welcoming you up at the end of the meeting. There are two ways for community members to give public comment at a school board meeting. You can record a voicemail before 4 p.m. the day of the meeting, and that will be played publicly during the appropriate public comment period. Or, of course, you can attend a meeting in person, fill out a public comment card, and give it to me before the meeting begins. Next, we'll move on to our reports, and we will start with our student board representatives report, and we are so lucky to have Oscar at the table tonight. We need to cherish this moment because this is one of our last moments with Oscar, at least here at this table, before he goes off to do great things.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. It is a very busy time of year. A lot is happening for students right now. APs took place over this past week, and they're still happening right now, so a lot of people are missing school for that, but exciting, busy time. Prom is this weekend, and graduation stuff is already starting to happen. The grad invites have been sent. All of that is happening. I'd like to give an update on extracurriculars because I've talked about that a few times here. And I'm happy to say that there definitely has been some progress made. I did meet with our athletics and activities director, and there has been pretty significant progress on the web page. The list is better. It's not perfect. There are definitely still missing clubs, but it is much better than it was before. And also there are now options for to create your own club and to apply for the HEF grant. Those buttons are now directly on the page, so I think that's a very good improvement. I would like to say, though, it's going to require continued attention to keep it updated. All it takes is a little less attention at the end of this year and beginning of next year, and then we're right back where we were a few months ago. When I was talking to our activities director, one of the things we talked about was possibly sending out a form to all the current leaders of clubs to say, will your club be running next year? And if so, who will that leader be? Because most clubs are run by seniors. So all the contact information we have right now is probably going to be useless next year. So keeping up with that information is going to be very important. The next topic I'd like to talk about, I know it was brought up a little bit at the last board meeting, but I feel that there is still some stuff to say on it, and that is the detention policy. We did meet with our administration and requested some numbers. We haven't received those yet, so I'm mostly talking about observations that I've made, observations that other student board reps and other students I know have made. And from what we can see, it has not necessarily been taken as seriously as I think it was intended to. And I don't think we have to dig super deep to figure out why. The students who are getting detention are getting it for skipping class, meaning they've already demonstrated that they're not necessarily going to do things just because they're required by the school. So if they didn't want to go to class, they probably really don't want to go to detention. When we look at that email that was initially sent out, the very first question that everybody had was, what if I don't go? What happens if I don't go to detention? Because it seems like a lot of people, frankly, haven't. And the answer that we've gotten from administration when we met with them is that it would move to further penalties like getting removed from extracurriculars and sports and clubs and whatnot. Two things jumped out to me right away with that. Number one, that means that this policy is pretty much unenforceable if a student is not in extracurriculars. If they get detention and don't go, what next? The other part is that I believe that a lot of the students who are skipping class might be doing so because they feel alienated from the Hopkins community. If you are somebody who would rather be walking the halls instead of going to your assigned class, obviously something isn't working how it's supposed to work. So I fear that a lot of those students are coming to school in the first place because they want to be involved in those communities that are happening before and after school. They want to be in those clubs, they want to be in those sports, and maybe they don't feel connected to academics. So my fear is that by removing students who are already alienated from the Hopkins community, removing them from those extracurriculars could just really worsen the problem for those people. The other problem I see with it is that it doesn't seem to be consistent with the messaging that students have been receiving. For years now, students have been getting a lot of messaging about restorative justice, which is great, and I think most students support it. But detention is not really restorative, to put it very bluntly. It's a punitive policy, it is. You did something wrong, therefore you get a punishment. You have to go to detention. And I think that that's been very confusing for myself, and it's been very confusing for a lot of students, where we've been hearing about restorative justice, and then all of a sudden, kind of without warning, we get hit with a punitive policy. So when we asked what actually happens in detention, what are students doing in detention? Are they just sitting there? What's happening? The answer we've been given is that they are doing restorative action plans, which we haven't really been given a definition for. But for me, and I think for most students, that makes it even more complicated, because now we've got overall broad restorative messaging, and then a punitive policy, and then an attempt to make the punitive policy a restorative policy. So it just feels like there are two conflicting disciplinary philosophies that are being implemented at the same time. All of this points to one overarching issue, which is communication. A lot of these issues that I've just mentioned could have been lessened or completely avoided if the communication initially had been better. For example, in that email we all received announcing that detention was a new policy, it said that if you miss 3 classes, you qualify for detention. As you all know, there are 5 classes in a day at Hopkins, meaning missing 1 day unexcused would let you qualify for detention. When we then talked to administration, we found out that the intent was 3 days, not 3 classes, but I only know that because I talked to administration. So I would assume there are a lot of students who are still under the impression that it's 3 classes instead of 3 days, because that's the communication they received. Again, what happens if I don't go? That was not included in the communication. All that we got was, if you miss 3 classes, you're going to detention. There were no further steps after that. And I really do think that some sort of acknowledgement of the punitive versus restorative thing, I think that would have been worthwhile when we've received so much communication about restorative justice. Implementing a punitive policy, I feel it's worth to acknowledge that. So, to conclude, I don't think this policy has gone over very well, and I think that it has made students take notice of some other overarching problems. I think everybody agrees that attendance is an issue. We constantly have students in the halls or skipping class, but it just feels like there could have been a better response.
Thank you, Oscar. I just want to check, are there any student board reps on the Google Meet? I don't think we have a Google Meet up. Okay, so then no, that would be no. So Oscar, thank you. I think your observations around restorative practices are really insightful, and you mentioned that one of the reasons that scholars might be skipping class is because of a lack of connection to the Hopkins Schools community, and we know that that's foundational to creating a restorative environment. So what might be, do you have any ideas around creating that sense of community, either within classes or building wide?
I think that part of it has to be that it's made clearer off the bat. So I don't think that detention necessarily is a bad policy. What's made it ineffective is that it is confusing. It's that we're saying restorative and punitive at the same time, and also there hasn't really been an explanation, and I didn't really mention this, but it was implemented 3/4 of the way into the school year, when students are already starting to have senior slide or whatever grade they're in. I don't have a full plan of what I think the solution should be, but I think that a lot of the rules that we have on the books could be implemented that haven't really been. I mean, we used to have rules where if you miss, I think it was three classes in a term, 3 classes, not 3 days, in a term, you're no longer eligible for credit. I might be totally wrong on that, but we have policies on the books that have worked in the past that I think could still potentially work. I think the main issue with it is just that there needs to be real clarity and not shifting the policy midway through it. It has to be one clear policy that everybody understands.
Thank you. And you didn't bring your full plan, the full solution to the
Sorry,
table tonight, Oscar? Man. Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Oscar? Okay, we will move on to our superintendent's report with Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
If I only had a brain. There we go. Good evening, everyone. Sorry for the delay. I was trying to project without the actual cord that's required. Well, thanks, Oscar, for your reflection. Having been a high school principal, it's really, really challenging to figure out how to provide the right amount of encouragement and support and natural consequences and, you know, all of that perfect mix of sort of supports and tactics that scholars need to be successful. And we have so many different kinds of kids, so I really appreciate us leaning into the difficulty, and I know that your administration is open to working with our students and staff until we get this right. So thanks for always being candid in your reflections. Well, as Oscar mentioned, it really is a busy time of year. The month of May is full of lots of celebrations and recognitions of staff across employee groups, and also opportunities to admire the achievements and learning of our scholars. So if any of us need evening activities, then every week throughout May, there is probably 3 to 4 events, concerts and musicals. Step-up days are coming up on Thursday, college admission, recognitions, athletic competitions, and family fun nights. So there's so much to do, and it's great to see how all of our educators and leaders and staff are working together to provide fun opportunities for people in our system. This past Sunday, Principal Ballard and AP Lorenzo Farley, Principal Ness, and Assistant Principal Sarah Schmidt, Director of IDL Ann Ertl, and I attended the annual Teacher of the Year luncheon that is held at the River Center in St. Paul. We had the pleasure of hearing speeches from Governor Waltz, Commissioner Jett, and the Education Minnesota President Denise Specht. So what was really fun is, as all 131 names of all of the Teacher of the Year nominees were read, it was great to hear Hopkins mentioned 7 times. So that was truly phenomenal, and I'd like to offer, on behalf of our system, congratulations to Miss Larson and Miss New from Eisenhower, Miss Grant and Miss Thomas from Glen Lake, and Miss Derricott from West. And of course, sitting at the head table in front of a really full house were the 11 Teacher of the Year finalists, including our very own Miss Fatuma Ali from our high school and Miss Allison Wolf from Juntos at Eisenhower. And what we learned from our Teacher of the Year finalists is that the process is very rewarding, but also very grueling. And so we're very proud of our Teacher of the Year nominees and finalists. And also Miss New was a semifinalist, and you may have heard that the 2023 Minnesota Teacher of the Year award was given to Michael Houston, who was a math teacher from Harding High School. And it's very apropos that this week is Teacher Appreciation Week. And so hopefully teachers are really feeling the love and support from all of us. And I think what I found very interesting is during the address from Education Minnesota President Denise Specht, she talked about the importance of teachers in our country and how they pulled all of us through the pandemic, but now face so much criticism. and school districts are highly scrutinized. And she cautioned all of us to celebrate teachers less and care for them more. And she acknowledged that that statement might sound kind of funny, but what she was saying is it's really great to give teachers, donuts and coffee and high fives, but sometimes what they really need is a meaningful check-in or healthy working conditions or a true recognition when they need mental health support. So it was a really great message, and I am hoping that we are taking the time to do that in Hopkins, and we do hope that this week our teachers do feel really celebrated and loved. There's a lot of lunches being delivered to staff funded by parents this week at all of our schools. Dr. Nolan, principal at Gatewood, is grilling for educators at Gatewood. Teachers at Weston Eisenhower are eating lunch from Famous Dave's and Nautical Bowl. Staff at the high school are having Panera this week. And the list really goes on for all of the celebrations that are happening for our teachers. And we need to really make sure that we're checking in on all of our hardworking educators. They've done so much for our system. I wanted to share with you that Alice Smith had a very successful musical this past Friday and Saturday. This year's Wizard of Oz was just as spectacular as last year's Matilda, and two fun twists for this year's performance. The first is that the two different students who played Dorothy, one on Friday night and the other on Saturday night, excuse me, are two students who share the birth name of Harper, which I thought was really interesting. And then also Dorothy in Alice Smith's musical is not from Kansas, but from Hopkins. So that's really fun. So directors Ben Parcell and Adam Haybison, who is Dr. Haybison's son, worked together to direct and produce this musical and explain that many of these students were on stage for the first time. And supporting lighting and staging and really all of the elements of this production for the very first time. So lots of learning and growth for our students. And I may have mentioned this at my report at the last board meeting, but International Denim Day was our high school's opportunity to blend fashion and advocacy. So students put on a fashion show organized by sophomore Samita Hill to show support for those impacted by sexual violence. The show took place during passing time, and student models held signs with statistics and facts about sexual violence as they walked the hallway/runway. So it's really amazing to see our students use their voice and their creativity to advocate for an issue that's important to them, but also has most likely impacted many of the adults in our system as well. May 1 was School Leader Appreciation Day, and as I've said before, behind every great school in this country is a great school leader, and Hopkins school leaders are truly the best. And to closely learn what our school leaders are best and brightest at, I have been shadowing each of our head principals for a partial, whole day, or multiple days. And what I've been able to see firsthand is how incredibly busy our principals are, how they attend to multiple things simultaneously at all points throughout the day, how they're always discerning for other people's emotions and struggles and successes, and really how they're situational in their leadership, because every different situation is cause for a different kind of leadership to be exerted. So I'm really proud of our principals and grateful for their leadership. We are also celebrating our phenomenal school nutrition professionals who feed our students' minds so that they can learn throughout the school day, every day. May 5 was School Lunch Hero Day, and from scratch cooking to food coaching and healthy eating, our nutrition services staff are doing a lot for our scholars across all of our schools. And I'm not sure if you know, but nutrition services prepares 650,000 meals for our students in a single year. So they are really wonderful individuals, experts in the kitchen, and always are greeting students with a caring smile. So I really appreciate our school lunch heroes. And I'd like to close by thanking the Hopkins Education Foundation for the most recent grant cycle. HEF awarded 11 grants totaling more than $48,000. The grant requests received by HEF deliver a strong message that Hopkins staff are committed to providing enriching educational experiences for the whole child. So these grants funded sensory and motor room equipment, social skill development tools, camping equipment for outdoor learning, DJ techniques, curriculum for a new Hopkins High School course, and so much more. And so we really appreciate HEF's partnership with Hopkins. And I think also specifically I'd like to mention the partnership with community education, because they're helping fund the before school and after school enrichment programming for our middle schoolers. And then I would truly like all of us to recognize Jennifer St. Clair for her more than 10 years of service to the HEF Board of Directors as their executive director. So Jennifer has decided to open a new chapter in her life, and if you have ever engaged with Jennifer St. Clair, you know she is really a bright spark and has so much passion and advocacy for HEF and especially for Hopkins Public Schools. And so she's built a strong legacy during her 10 years, and we really thank her for everything she's done to build a strong donor base so that Hopkins educators can continue to be supported as they think of new and innovative ways of supporting students. So thank you, Jennifer, and we look forward to celebrating with you later on this spring. And that's it for my report.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments for Dr. Mary Perry Reed? Okay, we can move into new business. Our first agenda item is our staffing resolutions. We'll invite Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot to the table, and I will turn it back to Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland, and thank you, Dr. Lightfoot, for coming to the board table.
I am so sorry, I skipped the treasurer's report. And Treasurer Adams didn't even call me on it.
We all just went right with it.
Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. It is the end of my teaching semester, and I am a little bit tired this week. I apologize. I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
I have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our treasurer's report with Treasurer Adams.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. Expenses of note this time include $86,000 to Normandale Community College for spring tuition. And one of our directors and I were talking before we started the meeting about how much our district spends on PSEO, post-secondary education options for our students, and it saves our parents a tremendous amount of money. So $86,000 for Normandale. We paid $35,580 to Hennepin Technical College for tuition for our nursing assistant class. $10,848 for fire alarm testing. I guess we were testing all the fire alarms throughout the district. And something for our IT department to work on this summer, $165,000 for new Chromebooks, which I imagine are destined for the high school. $1,052 for a new vibraphone. I don't know which band gets that, but It sounds like a great instrument. $356 for a visit by children's author Richard Schwastowski. And I don't know what schools or Meadowbrook he visited, okay. And something I've always wondered about, how much does a discus cost? It's $88.77 for a new discus for the track team. And then as a sign of the season, $7,942 for 418 academic graduate packages. And let's hope we can use all 418 of them. So with that, I move that we approve total disbursements in the amount of $1,671,706.71 for the period of April 20th, 2023 through May 3rd, 2023.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's report. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now we'll move on to new business with our staffing resolutions, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry-Reed.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland, and thank you, Dr. Lightfoot, for being at the table. I just want to acknowledge the time that we're in and the difficulty that every school district really has to align their budget with staffing. And we are currently in Hopkins experiencing a bit of enrollment decline, enough to impact staffing, and also other financial limitations that have caused us to make some staffing reductions that are impacting individual people in our system. And so our principals have had conversations with impacted individuals, and these are difficult conversations to have. Sometimes there's, another wonderful plan for an individual on the table, and sometimes it leaves the individual wondering, what's next. But we really care about our staff, and we know that this can be difficult, not just for any individual that may not be able to return, but also for the relationships in the building that have been built over time, and how this impacts the school culture. So we'll have Dr. Lightfoot just explain the technical aspects of these resolutions, and then take questions, I imagine, from the board before board action. And thanks again for being here.
Thank you. In front of you this evening is the third of a set of resolutions in our staffing resolution process. As you're aware, we start the conversations around the staffing and the budget. Once the budget parameters are set and the conversations with our Citizens Financial Advisory Committee are part of that process, we begin the budget work, as you're aware, in February. The first resolution that comes forward directs the administration to look at the available resource, utilize the available resource in the best methods that we can, to look across the system with what we have and what we have resources to work toward. The second resolution that was in front of you, late March, early April, that resolution directs the administration to work off of the preliminary budget, look at the available resource, and then once the preliminary budget is approved, we then work off this third resolution, which says, given the available resource we have and the positions available, these resolutions then are necessary and statutory requirement that we do, through roll call vote, terminate these positions moving forward into next school year. It's always the difficult part, as Dr. Mary Perry-Reed identified. It is part of the responsibility that we have as part of the fiscal stewards of the dollars that we have to use, and as the compassionate individuals, knowing that these impact people's lives. So with that, this resolution is in front of you this evening. It does call for a roll call vote. There are three portions of this resolution. The first is for temporary teacher contracts. These are contracts that were set as 1 year and for temporary positions that might be in place in the district. So that will be the first resolution. The second resolution is the termination of non-renewal and probationary teacher contracts. Those are probationary contracts that within the first 3 years, the district can do the release for without the continuance of what is called unrequested leave of absence. The third is the resolution that is for an unrequested leave of absence. Those are individuals who are tenured within the system and as a reduction then would have continued opportunity for district placement over the next 5 years. So there are 3 resolutions that are in front of you this evening. As part of this, each would have a separate vote through roll call vote. I am available for those questions that might be related to this and happy to add any additional information that I can to be of help to the board.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot. This is one of the most difficult votes that we take every year as a board, and as an educator of over 2 decades who's had my position cut or eliminated in the past, I certainly empathize with the position that some of our educators are in. As Dr. Mary Perry Reed said, some educators are moving on to other opportunities and experiences, and this is a really, at the same time, a very, very hard vote to take each year. Comments or questions for Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot?
Chair Westmoreland.
Director Adams.
I'll give my annual sermon on the impact of these notices. Just with a personal observation, my wife was a teacher in the district in various capacities for 45 years. And I think the first 12 years she was on staff, her name was on one of these lists every year. And she came back every fall. So just because your name is on this list does not mean that you will not be coming back. There quite possibly will be other options for you come this fall. And I think the second thing I would like to say is that this is not fun for us. And people are going to ask the question, well, the state's got a surplus. Why are you cutting teachers when there's so much money and they're going to be giving so much to education? Well, we don't know that yet, for one thing. They're still in conference committees over there trying to determine how much to allocate to school districts for the coming school year. And secondly, in addition to those, they're also imposing or likely to impose unfunded mandates, which will cost us money as well. So they give us money on one hand, they take it away with the other. And there's a number of things that are included in the omnibus bill that I've seen that we're going to have to pay, say we get a 5% increase across the board. I've heard estimates as high as 3% is going to go back to pay for these mandates that are not, which don't have any funding attached. So that's one of the reasons why we have to be very conscious about our expenses. And 80% of our expenses in our district are for personnel. So if you're going to make any cuts, that's most likely where it's going to have to be. So those two things, the fact that some of these teachers, and probably many of them, will be back in the fall or have the option to come back in the fall, and that our legislature has never funded education to the extent it really should be, and never to the extent that it was 20 years ago. So that's the end of my sermon. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? So Clerk Ross has his work cut out for him tonight with 3 resolutions, 3 roll call votes. So I'll ask for a motion for each resolution separately, and then Clerk Ross will do the roll call vote. So I would look for a motion that the board adopt the resolution for the termination and non-renewal of temporary teacher contracts.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second that the board adopt the resolution for the termination and non-renewal of temporary teacher contracts. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Ross.
Chair Westmoreland.
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen.
Aye.
Director Khan,
Aye.
Treasurer Adams,
Aye.
Director Peterson,
Aye.
Director Hartland,
Aye.
Director Ross. Aye.
Thank you, Clerk Ross. I have 7 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Next, I would look for a motion to approve the resolution for the termination and non-renewal of probationary teacher contracts.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the adopt, the resolution for the termination and non-renewal of probationary teacher contracts. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Ross.
Director Hartland,
Aye.
Director Peterson,
Aye.
Treasurer Adams,
Aye.
Chair Westmoreland,
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen,
Aye.
Director Khan,
Aye.
Director Ross. Aye.
Thank you, Clerk Ross. We have 7 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Next, I would look for a motion to adopt the resolution for the proposed placement on unrequested leave of absence.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution for the proposed placement on unrequested leave of absence. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Ross.
Director Khan,
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen,
Aye.
Chair Westmoreland,
Aye.
Treasurer Adams,
Aye.
Director Peterson,
Aye.
Director Hartland,
Aye.
Director Ross. Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Thank you, Clerk Ross. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot, and you can stay with us for our policy conversation. And with that, I will turn it over to Vice Chair Andreessen, who heads up our monitoring committee that writes and reviews policy.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. Before the full board today, the monitoring committee brings to you policy 613, temporary modification of graduation requirements. This is one that we are all very familiar with after the past 4 years. That it was one that we started using due to necessity from the pandemic, and we've come to realize the cumulative aspects of that on graduation requirements that go above and beyond what the state requires. And I think that we, as a committee, have had some good conversations around what it means to keep passing this based on how things are shifting and changing. So I will just preface it with that information that I think that we're starting to see that on graduation requirements, our schools are getting more adept at finding ways beyond modifying our graduation requirements, but that we're not quite there yet. And I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot to present the policy in more detail.
Thank you. One of the pieces of information that the monitoring committee requested, and thanks and appreciation to Principal Ballard and high school staff for providing a set of information. One of the questions that came from the monitoring committee is the number of scholars who have been impacted positively through the work of this waiver. And so I did say that I would bring that forward. There were 18 scholars, and part of this work also requires the form that was attached so that we know that there are demonstrated needs, reasons, and all of those documentation elements as well. So as part of that record keeping, 18 scholars took advantage of the waiver, and that was in 1920, 27 in 2021, 51 in 21-22, and on track for this year, just on estimates to date, around 45. So as we think about the historical component of this, important information that the monitoring committee had wanted the full board to have in front of them as well as we consider, again, the modification that is in front of you. So with that, if there are specific questions, I can easily do my best to attend to that, and Principal Ballard graciously is here as well if there are questions on any of those numbers or processes at the high school.
Thank you very much. So just to clarify, we're not looking at any changes this evening. This is part of the cyclical review of policies, and this one came up, and we are, it's before us to approve in its previous form. Excellent. Any questions or comments from my board colleagues?
Chair Westmore, oh, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to frame that a little bit differently, and that this is a temporary modification. I think it's only for a year, so we would, if we did want to continue to modify our graduation requirements, we would have to continue to pass this or start looking at, given our knowledge of the current state of education, are our graduation requirements perhaps out of step? And should we just look at those as a whole instead of passing this every year?
Okay, so given that this is temporary, it requires annual passage by the board. And is the monitoring committee considering a more permanent review of the policy at this time? Or is that something a discussion for a future date?
I'll defer that to better minds than mine.
The collective conversation really was, and I think the question, a good insight from the group, looking at, and even in conversations as we gathered the data with Principal Ballard, getting a broader sense of not only the impact of the waiver, but the data components that we're seeing related to the electives that are part of this, because this waives 4 credits of elective opportunity. And so as we think about that, what implication does that have for us as a system? Part of that analysis is ongoing and looking at what elements are part of the pandemic. That was the monitoring committee's question, and how are we responsive to that? And as well, do we need to be looking holistically as we look at data points as to what those graduate requirements are, and how do we see that in the traits of our graduates, and how do we look at that long term, especially in that long-term conversation. I don't know, Principal Ballard, if you'd have anything else to add there as well.
Well, in terms of the credits, this has come up multiple times in conversations in the high school. The most recent time is when we were talking about the 9th grade transition, and in fact, there were teachers who were in favor of actually increasing the graduation requirements at the high school. I think that when looking at this class specifically, they entered 9th grade, our first year in distance learning, so that there has been a significant impact to this class. One of the things that we are also grappling with is kind of how do we continue to end in this space where we need a waiver, but we also have these other scholars who are still excelling at very high levels. So just looking at the number of scholars who have earned scholarships this year, just as one data point, is way more than it has in previous years. So we're still trying to figure out, like, what is the impact of COVID? Are there things that are existing in our system? Are there ways in which we need to change and become more closely aligned to what our scholars are telling us as it relates to their needs, and shifting our model so that we can better support our scholars? As Dr. Mary Perry Reed mentioned at the banquet for the Teacher of the Year, the union president mentioned the mental health impact for teachers, but that exists for our scholars as well. And while we have added mental health professionals to our school, we haven't done significant shifts to our curriculum to support mental health, and we're wondering if there are ways in which we can have a more holistic approach to, like, the whole learner instead of just the academics, if that will be a way to help curb the need to consistently ask for a waiver each year.
So it sounds like quite a bit more discussion to be done before we would look at any sort of modification of our graduation requirements policy. And so tonight we're voting on this so that this policy is in place for our graduates this year.
Chair Westmoreland.
Yes. Director Adams.
Yes. Director, well, Nick. This is what year, did you say the fourth year in a row that we voted on this waiver?
Yes, this will be.
And it affects approximately 45 graduates this year?
So far with the data set that we have, knowing that that was pulled from the best set from our counseling staff.
Yeah, okay. But all of these, well, all of the students that are planning to graduate will meet state standards, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The components of the modifications that you are voting on this evening do identify that in the document itself, that the state requirements are the absolute that must be met, and then
Right.
there are waivers for elective opportunities that go along with that.
So our graduation requirements exceed the state requirements.
Yes.
That might be a reason to look at them. I don't know what other school districts are doing, but if we're constantly in excess of what the state requirement is, it might be worth a look. So, all right, thank you for the clarification.
Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
I just have a technical question. So we were recently looking at our 2022 graduation data, right? And there were a number of students who, didn't make it either within the 4 or 5 years. What is the technical process to make sure that these students who receive the waiver are included in the, in the graduation rate calculation? I just don't, I haven't seen that actual list. Have we cross-checked that list to make sure that there wasn't some kind of a glitch in our system where students who received the waiver were somehow not included? Maybe it's a silly question. I just want to make sure that there's a process for ensuring the inclusion of these students. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's challenging. And the reason it's challenging because these credits are, they're actively attempting to meet those credits. So if in fact they, these specific scholars pass every course that they need to pass for this term, then they will be eligible. But if for some reason there's a course that they don't pass, they would not be eligible because they will fall beyond the 4 that we're asking to be waived. So we're constantly monitoring like their progress, engaging with their families. Our counselors are doing an amazing job of engaging with families around that. But it really gets to the end of the grading period to see how each scholar is doing. And their information is included in the number of scholars that will be in the program that are walking across the stage. The way that we frame this is that if you are able to complete the school year with summer school, that you were included in the graduating class. So they are a part of it.
Okay. So they're not penalized from MDE's process for calculating our graduation rate because of this waiver if they fulfill their requirements for this quarter. Is that
That's
what you're
correct.
explaining?
Yes, by the end of the school year.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there questions or comments on this policy?
I had one clarifying question. When you said this reduction in the requirement from 20 credits to 16, is that the equivalent of, is it one class or classes worth 4 credits? I apologize, I don't have a student in high school yet, and so I'm not sure how. Like, is there a class equivalent? Class time equivalent?
For the 4 credits?
Yes.
Yes, and it depends because because we run courses in many different ways at the high school, so we have courses that run for a semester, we have some that run for 1 term, which many people refer to as a quarter. So it could be 1 class. I mean, it could be 4 terms. It could be a semester, if that makes sense.
Yes, I guess I was looking for, is it, for example, 1 art class that lasts either of those durations? Is that 4 credits, or is that? I just am looking for roughly how much of their time or day is kind of being waived under this policy change or this modification?
I would say roughly 4 classes.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? So I would look for a motion that the board approve the above policy in its current form for 2023.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the policy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move on to our board member reports. And I've seen board colleagues at quite a few events over the past couple of weeks, and so I'm just going to sit back and go last and count on you to cover them.
Well, I hope I can remember everything. But there's been quite a few meetings. I've spent a fair amount of time on legislative issues. On April 28th, I represented the Hopkins School District in Rhoda's absence at the AMSD Legislative Subcommittee meeting, which was interesting, especially considering that at that time, and still, we're getting down to the end of the session, and there's a lot of jockeying going on at the legislature. On May 1st, I attended the Legislative Conference Committee considering the Education Finance Omnibus bills, both the Senate and the House bills. And it was like watching paint dry, I have to admit. I thought there'd be some discussion. There was none. There was just a reading of the two bills and the similarities and differences between the two of them. And I guess most of the discussion will probably take place behind closed doors, so we won't be privy to that. The following day, I attended the Eisenhower listening session with parents and the PTO and Eisenhower administrators present. The following day, I attended the groundbreaking and saw a couple of my compatriots from the board at the Vista 44 Affordable Housing Development groundbreaking in downtown Hopkins. And that was exciting. I think it's going to be 45 units, I think, of affordable housing, and something that's sorely needed within our district. And then on Friday, I attended the AMSD meeting via Zoom, the MSBA legislative chat via Zoom, and LAC via Zoom. So it was a full day of legislative discussions. So that's my report.
Thank you, Director Adams. Vice Chair Andreessen.
Next, thank you. I also attended the groundbreaking and just wanted to give a special thank you to the group, I believe it's Beacon, who is going to be providing that housing, but also the wraparound services for families who are in that housing center. And Hennepin County Commissioner Chris Latondras was there, and it was nice to see that connection, given all the work he's done to help our community be able to track those families who need assistance before they get too far along and down the road of not having stable housing. So it was just really nice to know that we have a place just down the street for our families to find a home. And I got to attend a student-centered Learning for Equity conference. I go every year. I find it amazing. This year it was Amplifying Students, Elevating Community. I got to attend virtually, which I always appreciate. And one of the things I like most about this conference is that you hear directly from students. They are in the opening panel, they are co-leading or sometimes leading workshops and breakout sessions. And truly, the adults in the room are there to learn, and it's an amazing event, and you get to hear from people all over the country that are doing really innovative and student-centered and programs and learning opportunities. So that was great. I also found out about some things that are happening in Hopkins, which is always nice to hear. And I just spent the evening getting my ninth grader ready to go on the band trip to Chicago, which I think is going to be exciting for lots and lots of students in the district. So I'll let you know if there's anything to report from that. Hopefully there won't be.
Thank you, Vice Chair Andreessen.
I have a board report.
Wonderful.
I am a member, like Steve, of the Legislative Action Coalition. And as a group, we've been very busy monitoring the omnibus bills from various chambers and voicing our support to our legislators to attach funding to any new mandates that they may pass. As Steve mentioned earlier, some of those mandates, if they pass without funding, will greatly or even completely erode this 3 or 4 or 5% funding increase that they may give us. And we're finding it, even as a group that's like fairly tapped into the legislative process and has some ability to fairly easily seek extra information from the AMSD, for example, just excruciating to wait for it. And I know, I mean, I can only imagine what some of our teachers are going through as they wait for this legislative session to close and we get some actual answers for what our budget will be. And I wanted to acknowledge a bit that it is just painful, even from a parent's point of view, to, just sit and wait and hope that funding is there to maintain some of our very favorite programs that are very dear to my own students' hearts, but clearly dear to the hearts of hundreds of our students and families. And on a related note, I have students in band at various levels throughout the district and attended both of their concerts. They were fantastic and a real testament to how much time and how much care our instructors pour into our students, and to listen to a fifth grader from the beginning of this school year to the end of this school year is magical. It is amazing. And I know that we have a lot of community members here to voice some support, and I share many of those concerns, and I am waiting, not patiently at all, to hear some good news from our legislative session.
Thank you, Director Hartland. During Dr. Mary Perry Reed's board report, she talked about attending the Teacher of the Year banquet and President Denise Speck's words about caring for teachers. And I agree with all of that. As a teacher, I co-sign all of that. And we know that our teachers have been historically underpaid because our public schools have been historically underfunded. So I think, as part of this conversation around funding increases from the legislature, of course, we're grateful for any increase we get, and we know that it doesn't even make a dent when it comes to how we have been historically underfunded and how that has impacted teachers and staff in our buildings. So as part of the work that I'm doing with the Local Progress National School Board Steering Committee, We're hosting a webinar tomorrow night, and I can get you the link to my board colleagues if you're interested in attending. It's for school board members on the national teacher shortage, which I think will provide some much needed, national context to this conversation, and how those of us who are committed to advocating for fully funded public schools can be even more effective in our work. We also have some other great professional development opportunities coming up through Local Progress, including a national convening for school board members this summer. So I would be happy to provide more information to my board colleagues. And if any other school board members are watching right now from other districts, would be happy to provide you with information about that as well. I had the pleasure of attending the Resource West fundraiser, Springfest fundraiser. Dr. Mary Peary-Reed was there. Vice Chair Andreessen serves on the board of Resource West and does really incredible work in that space. Director Fisher was there, Director Brown, and Director Peterson. And I'm just going to say that Hopkins School District really held it down on the dance floor. So if you're looking for a good time, definitely come to Springfest next year if you want to, check out the moves.
Is there video?
I hope not.
Yeah, there is, but I think we are destroying it.
I really hope not. All right, any other board reports? Okay, so next we'll move on to our second public comment period for items not on the agenda. And we have our timer up. I'd like to invite Betsy McCann to the table. Betsy, welcome, and you can begin whenever you're ready. You were about to begin, and I interrupted you.
It's all good. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Betsy McCann. I'm a parent of a 5th grader and a 3rd grader here in this building. I volunteer every week in the 5th grade band classroom here, and my day job is as the Assistant Director of Bands at the University of Minnesota, where I help run our comprehensive band program and lead the Pride of Minnesota Marching Band. So I'm here today just to show my support and speak to the great work that our music teachers are doing, and we're all concerned, of course, about the impending changes in programming to our music programs. As part of my job at the university, I do a lot of work getting out into schools. I'm in schools all over Minnesota, all over the Midwest, and all over our country. And I'm in the classrooms, I'm working with students, I'm talking to teachers, I'm learning about what's happening in music education and really what's working and what's not working across the country. And I can see that in programs where the needs of students are met, those students are getting incredible service. Also, of course, in my role, I work with hundreds of students every year at the University of Minnesota, and these students are just a testament to what an amazing music education can do. My students represent over 100 different majors at the U, and they're all doing incredible work at the university as well as participating in music, and that's only possible because of their music educations that they came to the university with. Here in Hopkins, I can tell you that we have exceptionally brilliant, amazing, creative music educators, and they've drafted an innovative and game-changing collaborative staffing model for our schools. This is not something that happens in other places, and this could be groundbreaking for music education. The bad news is, right now it sounds like we're not able to adopt those plans, and we're looking at cuts and changes in our music programming. Realizing these cuts would create an enormous equity gap for our students, and that decision flies in the face of our district's stated goals. Our 6th grade band and orchestra students need small group instruction to gain the skills to be able to unlock future levels of music learning. Our choral students in 7th grade and 8th grade are at very different levels of what they can do and where they are developmentally, and they need differentiation in order to thrive. And the students at North clearly deserve the same educational opportunities as the students at West. So in these early years of music, the students are learning skills. They're learning music skills. But the thing is, those skills, once they become second nature, start to unlock levels of learning where we get the real lessons of music. And that's what our scholars need to get to Vision 2031. So what do we really learn in music? When it's done right, we learn to make our voice heard. And we learn to support the voices of others. We learn to work on a team, and we learn to create something unified with a diverse group of other individuals. Our students learn to try and fail and practice and try and fail. And maybe some of you have heard this with your students at home. Practice and try and fail and eventually succeed again. We learn empathy with others and with other cultures through an innovative curriculum. And we really just experience the joy and fulfillment of making music and belonging to something larger than ourselves. I've been an educator in the
Thank
music
you.
world for 20 years, and I hope that we can make sure that we support our teachers who are among the best in the country. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Betsy.
Next, I'd like to welcome Mary Kearns to the table. Welcome, Mary.
Good evening, and thank you for all that you do for the students here in Hopkins. I no longer have students in the public schools, but they made a tremendous difference within my family. As parents, we do all we can to introduce our students to the world, but we really rely on the teachers and their education to fill the gaps that we can't provide. In our personal house, my husband and I had no musical background. We had never taken any music programs in our schools, and so we didn't really do more than occasionally have the radio on for our own children. Then when my child got into 5th grade band and got all that supplemental education and support, her world blossomed, and she became a different student. She found her joy, she found her passion, she found her purpose for her adult world. So as you are going through these very difficult decisions of, making your budget work, I really encourage you to not take that easy cut with the arts, because it's not one of those core academic courses, but understand how much more it brings to your students' lives and what they do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
I'd like to invite Mike McCann to the table. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate all the work that you've done in the district, and I understand the tightrope you walk, in regard to funding. I kind of take exception to the view of some that music is an extra. Part of the brain that utilized in playing or listening to music is the same part of the brain that is responsible for math skills and engineering. And I think you could actually make the argument that music is as a part of the STEM program. Many of our revered scientists, have been scientists, but as musicians as well. And I think that we have an obligation as a society to produce and raise well-rounded children. Total education is more than just math and science. Some of the most interesting people that I know were band geeks, back in high school. I think music teaches discipline, responsibility, accountability, and cooperation. It allows students to be something, a part of something that really is bigger than themselves. Music can give people a joy for a lifetime. I certainly don't get any joy from diagramming sentences or doing algebra, as I remember my elementary days, but I do get joy from music. And I want the opportunity for my grandchildren and their classmates to expand their horizons and find their tribe. If I could decide, I would have more music in the curriculum and not less, but I urge you to consider the holistic approach in educating our children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite Jack McCann to the table. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time and service. I know listening to your schedule is kind of made me overwhelmed. So thank you for all of that work. So I'm Jack McCann. I have 2 kids, as I'm Betsy's husband, and in this building as well. So I believe in the vision that Dr. Mary Perry Reed and this board set out when our kids were in kindergarten as the class of 2031. And I trust the administration's looking out for that vision for every kid in the district and making tough decisions along the way that you all have talked about here. I know my communication isn't always perfect, so forgive me for that, but I want to note that in general, if I don't like a decision that's being made, my default assumption is coming from a place of trust with all of you in charge of this. And I feel that's the case because I think we have solid leadership, and I feel aligned with that vision, and the values of why you came into the district are the reasons we chose to stay in the district. So I really appreciate what you all are building here. I'm not an education expert. My wife is smarter than me in probably most ways, especially in this area. But I am concerned about the long-term damage that the proposed music and arts cuts would have to this vision. If these cuts are implemented, the equity and inclusion of our music program will be set back significantly. The music program takes years to build, in a moment to end. I understand some of the proposed cuts would be difficult, but some may also be necessary as part of a path to implementing the collective vision that you're working on. However, I felt compelled to urge a reconsideration to these cuts, since they will take us further away from that vision and the holistic child. And they're not easily reversed if you change your mind next year. These programs are really hard to bring back after that cohort is lost. You can't just bring them back in when they're in 7th grade. It's very difficult to do. As noted, I understand there's some acceptation of additional funding, and hopefully many of the staff members return. However, I'd ask that perhaps you'd reconsider these music cuts independent of the whole the budget process review when we hopefully have those funding from the ominous bills coming through. Yeah, so I guess, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you to all of our public commenters for joining us tonight and for, I was going to say sitting through, but that sounds like a deficit mindset. So for experiencing the entire meeting before you had a chance to speak. So we thank you for your patience and for your engagement. So with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is adjourned at 8:18 p.m.